Hey, I'm John Cannell. Today on Preppy Kitchen, we're making sky-high, buttery, flaky biscuits. So let's get started. First off, we're gonna measure out 4 cups or 480 grams of all-purpose flour. If you've never made biscuits before, it is so fun to do, and they're amazing compared to the store-bought kind. So you're gonna love this recipe. It's one of our favorites at home. All right, 480 exactly. Using a scale gives you the best results. We need 1 tablespoon of baking powder. That's our leavening agent. 2 teaspoons of salt. This is gonna give us a little bit of extra, flavor. We're also gonna use 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar. Okay, now the fun part starts. We're gonna get 1 cup or 226 grams of cold butter. Don't let it stay out, it needs to be like this, rock hard. Usually in baking, we want room temperature butter, but if you're making something like pastry or biscuits, you'll want cold butter. And I will say, if you're gonna splurge on an ingredient, use a nice butter for this because you'll taste it. You can also use a European style butter, which has more fat, less water in it, and you'll get an even puffier, flakier result. I'm gonna give you a lot of tips for flaky biscuits. Give me some in the comments if you have them too. This is a recipe that I like to do all by hand. The only tool I use is the whisk and a knife and my cutter for making the circles. If you use a food processor, or even if you use a pastry blender, like a little cradle knife thing, you just don't get the same results, in my humble opinion. You can let me know if you disagree though. Okay, all that butter is cut up in here. Now we're gonna use our clean hands. This is something the kids would love to help on, but they're at school right now. I'm gonna coat all the butter with flour so it doesn't clump. And now I'm gonna start breaking it apart into smaller pieces. This is a nice time to just reflect and have a moment. This is one of the few times where you're not on your phone. You're just having a tactile moment, and it feels really nice in your hands, the butter and the flour. Continue breaking this up. And as you do, you're gonna start working the butter in like this. Smush it together like that. We want to do everything we can to get nice flaky layers. I don't have any milk out right now. It's because it's in the fridge too. Everything is going to be cold. All right, so now the butter is getting worked up into smaller pieces and I'm smushing it together. It's also warming up a bit. I have ice cold hands, which is the only thing it's good for is baking, doing something like this. If your mixture was warming up because you have hot hands or it's a hot day, you could pop this into the fridge or the freezer and just come back in a minute, have a sip of coffee or two. I know I had a couple sips of coffee. I think I'm talking really fast. We want a crumbly mixture, and the butter should be between the size of a pea and an almond. So this bit right here, that's nice. That's a good sized piece of butter. You want to have big pieces of butter because you want to have big, buttery, flaky biscuits. So don't worry about it being all worked in together. I'm just double checking there's no big pieces that are too big. And now it's time to get that cold milk. I'm still drinking that coffee. Now we're gonna grab our cold milk. Right now I'm gonna pour the milk in. I want 1 1/3 cups or 320 mils. Move it around so it's not a lake of milk. This is gonna be a wet mixture. This actually reminds me of making a proper English scone, which is one of my favorite things to eat. And you can let me know if you want me to make that video again. I've kind of changed my recipe on it. So when you make something like this, it has a wet dough and you're oh, this is wrong. Double checking the recipe, rethinking your ingredients and everything else. It's supposed to be that way and it'll come out. So you'll see right now, this mixture looks a little bit what is this? What is this nonsense over here? But it's gonna work out. My dough is moistened, but it's still crumbly. It doesn't look like it's come together yet, but it will. So plop that mixture out onto your floured counter. This is gonna get patted out into a rectangle right now. So pat it out. It's not gonna look perfect. That's totally fine. Here's the deal, keep this moving. Feel free to add more flour underneath. We're going to work this into a 1 inch thick rectangle, and 1 inch is pretty thick, so feel free to break out your little measuring tape or whatever. Don't make your biscuits too thin. Fold this over now, okay? After you fold it, you're gonna cut this in half. I'm using a bench scraper, but use whatever you'd like. And now we stack. This is important. You're creating more layers, basically. It's like if you're making a rough puff or you're making regular pie dough. That's a trick for making regular pie dough. You just fold it a couple times and pat it out, and you get those nice flaky pages. Okay, moving it around. We're gonna pat this out again into the rectangle. And this gets repeated 3 times. So there's 4 folds and 4 pats. Fold number 2. Cut number 2. Oh, I'm not gonna eat this raw, but I want to. When we cut this, you're gonna see little layers. And I have a question. So this is like something I've been really wondering about, and I wanna get like a lot of feedback. When you make biscuits, it's actually so visually pleasing to see a round biscuit, but you have the waste that you have to like roll it back up and cut. But some people just cut square biscuits. What do you like? What would you do? I'm tempted to do the square biscuits, but that wasn't, I don't know. I've just never done that before. It seems too easy. Number 3, fold it, cut it, stack it. I mean, I can see the layers on the side here, and I haven't even finished this yet. Okay, one last fold, one last cut, one last stack. Now we're gonna pat this out into a 1-inch thick rectangle, and now this is the point where you're not supposed to go too thin. So it should be 1 inch thick. You want them to be up high to the sky. Grab a baking sheet, and now we're gonna choose our shape. Circles. Here's the deal. You do not want to have spent all this time making this amazing biscuit dough and seal the edges. So we're flouring this cutter every single time, and I'll be cleaning it off too. Look at those layers in there. That's nice. I see the butter, the little pages. This looks amazing. I like to wipe this down and then flour it again. Plop that down. Do you know that a good biscuit goes with everything? You could have it with breakfast, you could have it with lunch and dinner, little chicken, and my boys love biscuits. I like to be careful not to like manhandle the sides at all. They really want to be nice and free. We have some scraps here. I'm gonna use every single one of them. They're gonna be delicious, but just not the prettiest things. If I'm having these in the morning, I will just have a biscuit with some really nice butter melting in there, and then a little bit of like soft scrambled eggs, maybe some smoked salmon. Notice I didn't say preheat your oven yet, because we're gonna pop these into the freezer for at least 20 minutes. You can actually bake them straight from like full frozen, so if you want, bake up a few, freeze the rest for later. But right now, into the freezer you go. We'll be back. My biscuits are nice and firm. They're gonna go into the oven now for about 20 minutes until they're golden brown. Then one final touch. All right, I just pulled these out of the oven, and this did not go according to plan. They're all a little bit toppled over. You could see the layers though. Totally delicious, but I'm gonna show you what happened. They're a little bit too thick. So I went over 1 inch, and we're gonna have to like remake them again really quickly and just pat them down to be exactly 1 inch to maybe a little bit less, maybe 3/4. Second time's a charm, and that's more like it. Oh my gosh, as light as air and just delicious. I'm gonna grab some butter, but I hope you get a chance to make this recipe, and I'll see you in the next video. If you like this recipe, check out my bread playlist.